Vroom, 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 vroom. Honk, honk. Get in, losers. We're going struggling. Vroom, 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 vroom. Hello, friends, and welcome to another ride in the Strugglebus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. You know, talking about empty triangles, I mentioned them a lot, but we haven't actually gone over why empty triangles are bad, and what shape is in general, and what we mean when we're talking about shape in a game of Go, and what stronger players who are reviewing your games mean when they say that this move is good shape or this move is bad shape. So let's take some time and go over that, because we need to have a good understanding of why shape is important and what it means, so that we can play with better shape and get better results in our games. So before we jump in, do you guys know why an empty triangle is bad? I have to assume you know it's bad shape, but do you actually know why it's bad shape? So let's start there and go over what I think makes good shape, and then we can look at some in-game examples. I've got 4 examples from games that I've reviewed, and we can go over shape stuffs. So let's start from the beginning and talk about what I think is important for good shape. Okay, so we've got our blank board here, and so let's go over what I mean when I'm talking about shape. So if I had to give a definition of shape, it's how effectively or efficiently your stones are working together, or your groups of stones are working together in a local situation. So if you've got stones that are near each other, you want to make sure that they're working together well, that they're helping each other, that they are effectively and efficiently doing these things that make them better. So what are those 4 things? Well, the first is maximizing your liberties. We want to make sure that if we are trying to get more liberties for a group, that we do that in the most efficient way. The second important thing is we want to make sure that our groups move quickly. The third is we want to make sure that our groups can't be cut. And the fourth is that we want to make sure we are building sufficient eye space. Now, depending on the situation in the game, we care about some of those and we don't care about others. So if we're looking at this, and we're looking at this like little local fight we've got going on, eye space isn't really going to be too important here. We're not looking to make 2 eyes here. So that's just an example, but the further examples we'll go over each of these in detail. But let's take a look at this. So let's start with liberties. So right now, it would be Black's turn. Black's group has 1, 2, 3, 4 liberties. If we cared about liberties, and only cared about liberties, the most efficient move we can play is just extending. Because now, instead of there being 4 liberties, there are now going to be 6 liberties. Every stone that you play in a line is going to add 2 liberties. But what happens if instead of that, we go and we play our beloved empty triangle? Well, we'll see here that instead of having 6 liberties, we're only going to have 5. So this move is not an efficient way to get liberties, and that's one of the reasons that this is considered bad shape, because if we just cared about getting liberties, we wouldn't play this move. Right? If that was our goal, if our goal was, hey, we're going to play a move to maximize our liberties, we would extend. So that is what I mean by extending our liberties. What if we want to move quickly? Well, if we want to move quickly, let's say, for example, that we had played away and white had gotten this move, and so now this group's in a little bit of trouble, and it wants to move quickly. So here, probably the easiest way to move to safety would be moving towards the top of the board. So to move quickly, right, we would want to consider a move like L12, or consider a move like L13 if we can get away with it, right? We want to move really quickly. Similarly, we could play K12 or K13, right? These moves move pretty quickly. We could consider something like M11, because that also moves in the direction, but it moves pretty slowly. So if we cared about moving quickly, this wouldn't be the best move. You'll note, though, 2 moves that I'm not considering at all are K11 or L11. Both of these happen to make empty triangles as well, but you'll notice if the goal here was to move quickly, this just isn't quick enough, right? This is too slow of a movement, And now white can play something like this, and white is getting ahead of us, and that would be very problematic, as where if we extended here, and white wants to extend, white isn't going to get ahead of us. Even if white plays something like this, white isn't going to be able to get ahead of us because we will always be able to stay ahead of white, just as a quick example. So that's what I mean when I mean move quickly. The third important aspect of good shape is not being able to be cut. So that's why we can't move too fast, right? So we want to move quickly. But what happens if white plays something like this and then cuts us here? Now all of a sudden our groups aren't going to be connected, right? It's going to get pretty messy, and our stones die. And so we failed in shape because we let our stones get cut. And I would say of all the factors of of good shape, protecting your cuts is likely the most important. But it's interesting because moving quickly and protecting your cuts are at odds with one another, right? You can't really move too fast and protect your cuts at the same time. So you need to determine which is the more important aspect for whatever move you're looking to do, wherever the situation is. Again, every situation is going to be a little different, but you should be looking at moves that focus on those four things. Let's say that here black had moved here and white had played here. And maybe we'll say that, you know, there's another stone here and here, right? And now we're looking to play a move that moves quickly and gets us some more eye space. Maybe I actually want to move this stone a little bit. So we'll move this stone to here, and we'll say that white turns, and, you know, we ignored or whatever, and white got this. And so now maybe we're looking for a move that could get us some eye space. So here we could consider a move like this, because this looks to expand like how much room our group has. But of course, we need to make sure that our cuts are protected. And so, you know, it's going to require a little bit of reading here. This is probably going to break our shape, so we probably can't get away with that. And that's all because of this stone. But maybe if this stone was here instead, we could consider a shape like this. Here, we should be nice and protected, and, you know, we're threatening to make L12 an eye. And so this is what I mean by expanding your eye space. And so this would be a shape move that we could play if we cared about extending our eye space. Again, if we cared about liberties, we would probably just extend. If we purely cared about protecting cuts, maybe we could play this diagonal, though also this does a fairly good job of protecting our cuts because this is pretty good shape. So those are just small examples. Let's get into an example that we see a lot that goes over the most important, which is protecting our cuts. So we're just going to play a little game here. Black plays this, white plays a 3-4, black plays a 3-4 as well, and white plays a 4-4. Black extends here, and then white jumps into the 3-3. Fairly typical stuff, right? Black decides to block, white extends. Black hanes, white hanes, black pushes, white pushes, black pushes. And instead of pushing again, which is the more modern approach, white goes old school and plays this hane. And black hanes threatens to kill the stone, and white connects, and now it's black's turn. So here we have two cuts that we care about. They're right next to each other. So we know we're in a little bit of trouble here if we don't do anything. So we need to play a move here. And so the question is, what moves are we going to consider? Well, first and foremost, we have a cut at A. So that is the more dangerous of the two cuts, is this cut right here. But it's especially dangerous because of the cut at P16 as well. But this is the cut that we need to fix. And so there are a number of moves that we can do to fix it. We can just connect. We know connecting fixes the cut. We can also consider a move like B. That will fix the cut. We can consider a move like C. That'll fix the cut. We can consider a move like D. That'll fix the cut. Or E. There are lots of moves that will fix the cut. But some are better shaped than others. What we don't want to do, we don't want to just connect, because while this connects the cut, it doesn't really do anything else. It doesn't efficiently or effectively increase our liberties. it doesn't move us very quickly, and it doesn't get us any more eye space. All it does is connect. Is there a move that we can do that will fix this cut while also doing some other things? And there is. The typical move that we will see here is this diagonal. And the reason we like this is it obviously protects the cut. If white tries to cut, we capture. But not only that, it moves faster. It moves faster away from this group. And yes, it's only one space, but that makes a difference. Additionally, if white tries to reduce this later in the game, after we block here, this is now going to be sensei, and look at what we're doing for eye space. Now all of a sudden, R15 is really close to being an eye, S14 is really close to being an eye. As where if we had just connected later in the game when white plays this, it's going to come in sensei for white, and we're just going to have worse shape. We definitely don't want to play this move. We would much rather this stone be at R17 and then R15 be somewhere else on the board. So this is just an example of good shape versus bad shape in an example that we would see in our games. And I know this seems subtle and small and not a real big deal, but this is really important. The difference between this and playing R15 is probably like half a move. You're probably giving half of your move up by connecting rather than playing this shape move here. So that's why I wanted to start off with this example, because this is what we're talking about. And this, if you're unfamiliar with shape and why it's important, this move might not seem terribly important to you, but it is. It really, really is. Anyway, so let's take a look at some examples in games that go over some various cases here for good and bad shape. Okay, so here is our first example, and this comes from a game that I was reviewing. And the interesting bit will be after black plays here. So black plays this little diagonal attachment. White decides to block. Black extends. White hanes. Black decides to hane. Under black could have considered taking the cut, but instead black plays this, and white plays the hane. Black connects, and now white has two cuts. So we should fix that. And so the question is, how are we going to fix these cuts? So there are moves that we can consider, right? We can, of course, consider just directly connecting here, directly connecting here. We can obviously consider this diagonal. We can consider this diagonal. So let's go over what we would consider for good shape. First of all, what would I consider bad shape? I would consider A to be bad shape because it just connects. And this is what was played in the game, and I made a comment on it. I'm going to guess that most of you are probably leaning towards playing R12. And that is a perfectly fine move as long as we do not care about this cut. And I think we're probably in an okay place there. We could also consider just directly connecting because it does fix this cut, but it doesn't fix this move. This is another risk that can come as long as this ladder, although I guess as long as this ladder works for white, it's going to be okay. But the problem with doing it this way is now any move over here for black is going to be sensei. And that's just no good. So that's why we would probably typically just play C right here to effectively fix this cut while also moving faster in a direction that we absolutely care about. And again, this also provides more eye space. If black tries to do something like this, all of a sudden we've got really good eye space here. In the game, of course, white played here. So for bad shape, and then unfortunately, the next move that black plays is completely inexcusable, especially from a shape perspective. Because again, the most important aspect of our shape is making sure that we can't get cut. So I'm sure most of you looking at this board are saying, of course, black would play here. This is, where else could black play? Well, I'll tell you where else black could play. Black could play here, I guess. And this is where black played in the game. And again, these were two newer players. If this was my game and my opponent makes this move, I'm just taking my hand off the mouse and I am waiting for them to push the undo button because this is clearly a misclick. But in this case, this is where black played. And so now white just gets to rip through and black is already cut. This shape, this broken shape, is referred to as a broken Kama. So we know that the knight's move, if we had two stones here, is pretty efficient shape. Moves quickly, it's tough to cut, but But that is very much not the case when there's an opposing stone already in one of the two spots. So that's why this is referred to as a broken Kama. So now white pushes through here, and this instantly becomes a tough game for black because black now has multiple groups that they have to worry about, as opposed to keeping this all together and just making it nice and strong. So this would be a very blunt example of a shape failure. And so we need to make sure that we don't play moves like this, because then we instantly get cut. And the most important aspect of our shape is protecting our cuts. So let's take a look at our next example. So this next example actually comes from a bus ride game that I did. And so I was white this game, and everything kind of makes sense. Black decided to pincer, so I jumped into the corner. They blocked on this side, so we did this variation, which absolutely is Joseki. We just need to be aware that there is a push and cut here. And so later in the game, this might become an issue. And so that's basically what happens, is the game continues, and eventually I get K3 on the board after some exchanges. And now this push and cut is pretty problematic. So this was good shape when we played it. It's still good shape now, because the cut was fine. It wasn't a dangerous cut, but now it's dangerous. So black should be looking at fixing this cut. And so the question is, where would black play for good shape here? So whenever we are considering shape, this is what I tell my students to do, is whenever you're about to play your move, let's say that it's black's turn. Black wants to protect this cut, and so black plays here. What I would ask is, before you actually click this move, go, okay, I'm going to play here, and then ask yourself, why are you playing here? What is the purpose of this move? And so you look at that and go, well, the purpose of this move is to protect the cut. And then my next question is there a better move to protect that cut? Because that's our goal. So is there a better shape move that does it? And so then you could look at it and be like, oh, well, if I'm really interested in taking this cut and I care about shape, let's look at some of the other aspects. We could consider playing O4, which protects the cut and gets us more liberties. We could consider a move like L5, which protects the cut and moves us faster and gives us good shape here, more eye space. So these are moves that we could consider that would be better than N3. We could also consider a simple move like N4 that protects the cut, but I think there are better shape moves for that. Regardless, my opponent ignored, and so we did an exchange over here, and I immediately took the cut. And so now we're coming back into a situation where shape matters. Shape always matters. So what's our goal with these two stones, if we're going to save them? If we're going to save these stones, but let's say that's our goal, what are we going to do? Well, we need to move fast, right? We need to get out of here. And so if you want to move quickly, moving up and left is the way to do it. So in this game, my opponent played L4. And we know that this isn't good shape because it doesn't move fast. It doesn't extend liberties. It doesn't really do anything. It does protect our cuts. This group can't be cut, but it's not great shape. So before you play here, you go, okay, I'm playing this because I need to run out. Then I'm going to ask you, is there a better move for running out? And so we could consider this Atari, and then maybe this move here. We wouldn't want to connect just bluntly like this. This doesn't make good shape. This moves out a little faster. So now, how is white respond to this? Is white going to Hane? If white Hanes, we can Hane. And so you can see this is a very effective way to move out quickly. As where if black plays here, white can just block, and that's it. Black no longer can move out quickly. Sure, black can kill that one stone, but this secures a lot for white. Conversely, if white wants to continue fighting, which white probably does if they were taking the push and cut, white can just extend here, and this is going to be a tough position because of this slow move. So again, figure out what the goal of your move is and figure out the best shape move that you can play that also achieves that goal. So let's take a look at the next example. So we have our next example here. This was one that I reviewed. This was a 9K and an 8K playing, so pretty complicated game. A lot going on here. And so here, black has a pretty weak group here and is trying to connect out to live. White jumps, and then black plays here, which threatens to cut. So we have a cut here that we need to protect. And so we need to figure out the best shape move to protect the cut. So there are some options. We can obviously just directly connect, and this is what white played, and I commented that this is not good shape because if we're looking to protect the cut, there are better ways to do it. So if we care about extending liberties, we could look at just playing the bamboo joint because this protects the cut. It also moves a little bit in this direction and gets us some more liberties, but it's pretty slow, but it's a very solid shape. Another move we could consider is playing this move, and this kind of does a little bit of everything. It obviously protects the cut. It also starts building some eye space because if black tries this, all of a sudden J5 is probably going to become an eye. Also, it moves a little quicker, right? This moves faster in an important direction. So this is kind of a good example of a shape move that does a little bit of everything. It protects the cut. Yeah, I guess it doesn't increase our liberties, but we didn't need any extra liberties here. Again, you're not going to find a move that does all four of the things because they're generally at odds with one another. You can't move quickly and extend your liberties at the same time, and so that kind of showcases this. And so that's why this is a shape that you guys may be familiar with. This is called the small table, and it doesn't take up a lot of room, and it's 4 stones, but it's very solid. It does all the things. Can't be cut, gives you good eye space, and it helps you move. So this is probably the move I would consider here if we were looking at shape moves. Unfortunately, white just connected here and it went along, and white's just left with pretty awkward shape here. That's all. The stones don't really do too much, and they could have been more effective. So let's take a look at our last example. It's kind of a disaster of a game because of a shape mistake, but there's a lot to go over it from a shape perspective, and so there's some things I want to show you there. So let's go take a look at that game. As I mentioned with this one, this is another game that I reviewed, and the bottom right corner gets really hectic really quickly because of a bad shape move. So it gets really fighty. I'm not going to go over if this move's okay or if white should be cross-cutting. Like there's a lot of stuff here. This is a mistake, but not necessarily from a shape standpoint. But then black plays this, and I have to assume this was a misclick, right, guys? It's because it's that broken Kmot again. It just asks to get cut immediately. So immediately because of this move, the game is just in terrible shape for black. This is going to be a very, very, very tough game for black. Even if black plays here, this is going to be particularly tough because black, if black wants to do this, it's still just all sorts of bad. So anyway. But black played here. It's a white push, and it continues being a little weird, and that's fine. All these things are just happening. Okay, but here, this is where I want to start talking shape stuff. Though we have to admit, many mistakes have been made by both players to get to right here. But this is where I want to discuss our shape options because this is a pretty straightforward one. So black has decided that saving these 5 stones is important. And we're not going to go over whether or not that's the correct play to make here. But so we've decided it's important. These 5 stones need to live. Sure. So what's going to be our best shape move for this? Well, we need to run, and we need to run fast. So is a move like this fast enough? It certainly protects the cut. But is it fast enough? Hard to tell. If we play here, is this going to be a problem for us? It very well could be, right? Because it leaves this cut. So that's what we're dealing with here. How quickly can we move here? We have to consider the fact that we might be able to get cut. So similarly, can we play this far? And this might be able to work because if white cuts here, it's possible that we can find something, some kind of Tsuji, though I'm unsure. So, it takes a little bit of reading, but if nothing else, we can read these moves and go, it doesn't look like it works, and then we can decide, is this the move or is this the move? So that's kind of what I look at here. Unfortunately, black played here, which again, we know is a bad shape because it's an empty triangle, right? It doesn't increase our liberties, and it just moves so slow. So white immediately punishes by playing the Hane. Black plays the Hane, white Hanes again. We get this little crosscut stuff going on, and that's fine. Black plays here, and now white turns. So this is the next one, and kind of the last example for this video. So I want you guys to give this one some thought. So from a shape standpoint, where are you playing here? And it's worth noting that I say it's, from a shape standpoint, but really it's black to play. We just need to make sure that whatever move we're doing, it's good shape. That's always the case. So while this is a shape question, it really just truly is, where does black play right here? So we're still running, right? Black isn't alive yet. It looks like we're in threat to get surrounded. So we need to go and we need to move. So there are a couple options here that I would consider. First of all, we want to be running left as fast as possible. So can we get away with playing A? Can we get away with playing B? If those don't work, then, should we be playing something like C or D? Or how about a move like M6 here? That could work as well, right? If we play here, and then white plays here, and we play here. This looks like okay shape. It's not the best, right? But what would you end up playing here? Would you, if we can read it and we see that this works, then fantastic. And if it doesn't, then, we can play a move like this. If those are the moves that you are considering here, that's good. It's worth noting, I have not labeled any of these three moves because they're just too slow. We can't be playing moves like that. Unfortunately, that's exactly what black did. Black played right here. So it just moves so slowly in a situation where we needed to move as quickly as possible. So this is a failure from a shape standpoint because, again, it allows white to potentially play and get ahead of us faster. As where if we can play a move like this and it works, we have to read here, but I think this move probably works. This is so much better. This is going to be way tougher to surround for white than this is. So that's kind of what we need to be doing here. Before we play this move, right? We're black, and we're about to play this move. We have to stop. And before we play this, go, okay, why am I playing this move? What's the goal of this move? And you go, okay, well, the goal of this move is to move to the left. I got to go to the left. And then you go, okay, is there a better shape move with that goal? And you can go, yeah, there absolutely is. I can jump here. And whether or not this is the correct answer, it's okay. We need you to give thought to it and then start playing better shape, because while this might not be the answer, it is certainly better than playing this. It is a much better shape move. And yeah, maybe this was the answer. Maybe this was the move that solves everything, but you just couldn't read it out, or you misread and it didn't work, or it doesn't matter. What's important is that we at least try that, and even if we just end up settling on this move instead, it's still good. That is still so much better than playing this. So that's all I have to go over shape today. It's an important concept, but it's one we haven't discussed before. Let me know if you have any questions with it, if there's any clarification you guys think this needs, and I can maybe do a follow-up if we get enough questions. Either way, that's where we're going to leave this one for today. So, as per always, thanks for coming out for another ride in the Strugglebus, where every wheel is an empty triangle with terrible shape. Have a good one, guys.